So just before we get into the keys and start going through this, once I get to this section here, I'm going to go through much faster as we've already kind of talked about the template a couple times now. So I'll go through sort of at the normal speed that I work, and if you guys want to follow along, I'll explain it in a much quicker fashion. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to do. I just want to explain two little things here, and these are just two extra methods that we can try. So I told you the first way I start to approach a shot is to start testing different keys. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then infinite number of keys. I'm going to start to test different areas. But there's one method we can do that sometimes can give us some pretty interesting results, and this is called well, there's no name, but one method is to create a clean screen, and this uses a little bit of math. So it uses a divide and a multiply, and so it kind of starts similar to our IBK color method. So you can yeah, I'll just show you basically what it does. So we have this footage, and essentially what we want to do is our IBK stack technique. So we do our IBK color, and then we sort of just duplicate it a bunch of times. So we can just put it here, and then we just kind of paste it a bunch of times. You can either change the number to being double. For example, we start with the first one, and then the second one will double that number. So we can just set it to like 28, and then we can set it to, I don't know, 60 or something like that, and we continue like that. Or sometimes it works to literally just copy and paste it a bunch of times. And if you compare it to just having one, you see if we use one node and we expand it and we compare the difference, we see the difference between this one and just pasting it a bunch of times. You see how it pulls the color out differently when we copy and paste and we kind of just stack them versus this one where if we use one, it kind of starts to blur it inward a little bit and it's not as good. So the stack in this case is working pretty good. So basically, just the same approach, do an IBK color, go here. I'll just do it from scratch really quick. And I'll show you guys what this technique actually does. It's a little bit different than normal keying. So this is a little bit different than everything we've talked about so far, but I just want to show you this one extra thing. So we can do our normal thing where we kind of get the black edges right to the edge of the other colors. So we want to capture all the detail. So we can play with the light values, and you just play with the sliders until you get something that's right on the edge but not breaking. So I usually just play around with those, play around with the darks just very slightly. Try not to get details that we're not supposed to have. So I'm trying to get rid of all the stuff that's in there. Usually, as I said, you don't have to play with the darks as often. So I think default sort of good. Size set to 1. I pretty much always set that to 1. And then we can just set the patch black. So we can start pulling in the edges. That's what the patch black is doing. And we can pull it in a little bit. We notice that there's still a little bit of color in there that's not green, so we could push the erode. So the erode kind of will, if we before the patch black, we can just expand where the black is, and then start to pull the black in with the patch black. And then that's good. So we can just paste that a bunch of times, and we get something like that. Then we can start increasing that number to something larger, and then just 12. And then duplicate it, 24, and then you see it's doing the effect that we talked about. So we're expanding it inwards. And so, okay, so that's the same thing we talked about before. And, as we would normally do, we'd plug it into IBK Gizmo, setting the IBK Gizmo to green, and then you would get your alpha. So we already covered all of that, but this is different. So instead of using IBK Gizmo, just ignore that for a moment. And just look at where this is going. So we have the IBK color, and we're dividing it by a green color. So what we actually want to do is we take a constant and we select the color that is the correct kind of green. So maybe basically what this technique is doing is we'll kind of flatten out the green screen. So if we look at the result of what this is going to do, you see how the green screen is very uneven. And if we do this technique, it'll actually do some math to kind of even out all this area. And sometimes it helps us get keys. So it's just one way to do this. So basically you start with the clean plate that we've already created. You divide it by the color that you want. So we select a color on that green screen with a constant, and we divide the two. So you get this weird result like this, and you take that result and you multiply it against your original footage. So you have your original footage, you multiply it against it. And that will give you this. And this is sort of crazy, and it's affecting our normal footage. So yeah, it's not used for like the main center, but basically it would just help us. It could help you key this area. So maybe you could use a key light now on this area to get a key. So if I take the key light, I can take the color and just select. If I disable it and I select the area around here and I key it, we can see we get a pretty clean key around here. Now, if we compare this to just the IBK Gizmo, just plugging that in, the IBK Gizmo gives us a slightly different key. You see the IBK Gizmo has some weird stuff around the edges, some kind of weird noise around the edges, and the key light doesn't. So in this case, the key light actually works better in some areas than the IBK Gizmo, like this traditional IBK technique. So this is like a clean screen technique. You create a clean screen first, and then you use a different keyer than the IBK to get a key. So it's kind of weird because technically you're stacking two keys. This is kind of creating a clean plate, and you're multiplying against it, but it does give you a different result. So it's just one extra technique for you guys to know about and refer back to if you ever have some weird problems. So you see here, look at the IBK Gizmo Alpha. We have some weird edges on there, and it's kind of spiky versus the key light, which is a little bit more smooth. It seems to be maintaining the transparency a little bit better. And so you can also adjust the black point and white point to clean that alpha up a little bit. So there's two different alphas that you can get by using this IBK. So that's just the divide. And so you notice that there's a bunch of holes and crazy stuff going on in the key light. One thing you can do is you could have an IBK Gizmo plugged into this, and then use that as the in mat for this key light. So you can plug in the in mat, and that would sort of fill in the holes if we set the in mat from none to alpha. And sometimes you want to erode that in mat in a little bit, so it's kind of like a core mat type of thing. So I know I'm explaining this a little bit quicker, but yeah, this is just one alpha. So if you did all this work right here, all of this work would just be one of these keys. So we could put all that work right here, and then we would just mix it in the areas that it works or the areas that it doesn't work. So that's the clean screen technique. It's basically just the divide, multiply, and using a key light instead of an IBK, or you could use a Primat if you wanted. And then for all the core areas, you need to use basically a different alpha. That's what the in-mat is doing. The in-mat is almost like you're plugging in another core mat into it. So you don't necessarily even need to do the in-mat. You could just do the effect that we created here, and then just keep the edges. And then you'd use another alpha for all the core. You'd fix all that stuff with a different alpha. So that's just to keep in mind. I'm going to keep it plugged in here just so you guys can remember, though, if you're looking at the script. One other technique we have for to get alphas is painting. So this is the last sort of technique I'll teach in terms of pre-preparing stuff. But one example of an area that would be maybe sort of tricky to key. Let me find what frame I painted this on here. It's frame 56. So this is original footage here, and sometimes there's some semi-transparent edges going over. So if we were to key this with a key light, and we were to select this area, so I disable, select with the control drag, and then enable, we see that that pole is sort of in the alpha there, whatever that thing is behind. So obviously we remember that we rotoed that, but basically the problem is if we only look at the alpha, ignore the RGB in this case, we're only looking at this. So a traditional way to remove or fix this would be basically to garbage mat out this area. So you would basically go here, you would cut it out with a merge stencil. So I take a merge node and I switch it to stencil. And I merge and I get rid of that. Let me turn off the clip. So we have something like that. And then we would go back with another alpha and we would say merge max. So we would add our holdout. And then we would just roto the dude back in there. So I'm just doing it really fast to show you guys. And set that, turn off the clip for the roto. And just look at that. So that's kind of how you would normally deal with an area like that. You have an area that's sort of difficult to key because there's something behind. You stencil out the area that's bad and you replace it with just a roto shape that's going to solve the entire area, which you could blur a little bit. And you're basically solving it. So that's like one way of approaching it. But one other way of approaching it is to, if it's only on a few frames, sometimes it's difficult to get the same nice alpha. You see, like in the Keylight, we're getting, I don't know if it's the best alpha in this case, but we're getting a certain type of fall off in the motion blur. And sometimes with this approach of what I just showed you, the blur and everything, it doesn't give you the same exact motion blur of this area. So rather than doing this whole approach here and approaching it this way, basically you can just roto paint out that object on the few frames that it appears. So what I mean is if we go to the roto paint node, I've basically just clone stamped that thing out. And then I'll take some other areas, like some of the area from this, I don't know, jacket that he's wearing and sort of paint it with a very low opacity. So you can set the opacity up here, set it 0.05, and then just sort of paint something very semi-transparent in there. And then just go frame by frame and paint out the object. And if you do this before you do your keying, you see here's the pole, and then I just painted it out. Now I can just use a keyer in that area, and I don't have to do a garbage mat and a holdout mat because I've just corrected the plate with this paint. And you see that the motion blur is going to be very similar to what's next to it, and I don't have to try to match it with like roto shapes and stuff like that because I'm just doing that pre-painting work. So that's pretty useful, and that's probably how I would deal with this case actually, rather than doing this whole stencil and max approach. So yeah, that's a couple tips there. I'm gonna copy this roto paint, and I'm gonna put that on our plate because I think that work will be useful. So I'm just gonna keep it. And okay, so now I'm gonna start going on to the rest of the keys and starting to build these out. So we might use some of these pre-clean method. I might use this because it seemed like it worked pretty well, but I'm not going to use it first. I'm going to go through the traditional ones. And again, I'll talk much faster at the speed I'm going now and just try to work through this. Hopefully you guys can rewind if I go a little bit too fast. But I don't want to re-explain things too much for the people who want to just get on with it. So.